Hey guys, this is segment 2 of 4 of the pregame.com audio and video podcast for September 9th. I'm your host, RJ Bell. In the second segment, what we do is talk about a big game. We break down one big game. Usually, well, during football, it's going to be a football game. And I'm joined by Marco D'Angelo, 30 years in the handicapping business, and Vegas Runner, a genuine professional bettor here in Vegas. And this week we're talking about, in segment, the first of 2 segments of the big game preview, we'll be talking about college in the next segment. This week, Indianapolis, Jacksonville. Take it, Vegas Runner.
It's Jacksonville at Indianapolis. This line opened at 6.5 or 7. Betting public likes Indianapolis in this game, drove it up to 7.5. Right away, the wise guys got involved, took all the 7.5s out there, and I think they're going to do the same if the trend continues and the public keeps coming in on the Colts.
Now, you mentioned the public's love of the Colts. I did an interesting article at pregameblogs.com, just came out today on Wednesday. I looked at the entire season of the NFL and saw how many games they were favored in. And the Steelers actually are favored in all 16 games this year. New England is favored in 15. They go on the road against Indy, and they're not favored. But Indy's actually favored, if I recall, in 13 games.
Oh, wow.
So this is a very publicly embraced team, and you mentioned the movement going up over 7 here.
Yeah, and everyone knows the history of them in the preseason. No one's worried that they were 1-3. We know they don't care about the preseason, so everybody expects the Colts to come out and be the Colts. Wise guys see it a different way. Jacksonville's played this team tough every time. Even though the Colts have won 6 of the last 8, they've showed that they could beat them in a running game or a passing game. The first game last year, they ran for 200 yards, made Peyton turn the ball over twice. Second game, they each threw for like 350 yards, and Jacksonville played them real close. So the wise guys think it's going to be close again. The reason I think they look at it this way is they don't think that's that huge of a home field edge in this game for Indianapolis. 3 of the last 4 games in this series have been won by the road team. So when you factor that in, and you get up over a touchdown.
Let me jump in here. 3 out of 4. Mm-hmm. Now, what you see on the internet is the trends.
Right.
Because there's the computers spit them out, and these amateur handicappers, they might be selling picks or they might not, but they're still amateurs. They use the trends, and the trends don't make sense.
No.
To me, this 3 out of 4 as a pure number doesn't tell me anything.
No, just we're looking at the same teams. They're playing each other.
So that's the question.
Division.
That's my point is, as you watch these games, does it look like, because the number 3 out of 4 doesn't impress me, but it does back up if you're seeing something with your eyes. What are you seeing? You're seeing that home field between these 2 teams specifically mean less, or in the NFL in general?
Yeah, because I think Jacksonville has shown that the ability to go in there and play them tough.
So specifically Jacksonville going into Indy.
Yeah, and that's why, to me, I thought it was significant that 3 of the last 4 times they've played such a close game where it comes down to a field goal. I know it isn't a trend of since '81, but we're looking at these 2 teams now today.
Well,
and this is the same offense and defense that has played these last 4 or 5 times.
There's 2 different types of trends. There's a trend that sits alone and you don't know anything about it, but the numbers are what you're believing in. And then there's a trend that validates something you've seen with your eyes. So to me, if it's validating something we've seen, then it doesn't need to be statistically as significant. If it's just a blind trend that we're just looking at the math, it needs to be bigger. So for example, let's say that you're watching a game, Marco, and you say, I think the Steelers are playing poorly. Now, in the next 2 games, if they don't cover, that's only 0-2.
Right.
That doesn't mathematically tell you much, but it validates what you're seeing.
Right.
All right, so jump in with your thoughts on this.
Well, I'm going to disagree with what VR is saying on this game. And this is one of those games, you're going to hear me talk about lines and how I read the line and what I'm going to look at. The fact that Vegas set this number up at 7, given what you've said, that Jacksonville always does play Indianapolis tough. Whether Jacksonville has a good team or bad team, they do have a history of playing Indianapolis tough. When you consider that, then throw in the fact that Indianapolis has a new coach this year. Tony Dungy's gone. You got Jim Caldwell taking over for Tony Dungy, so you got an unknown factor. This would make it even more of a better spot for Jacksonville to cover, yet they put up the 7.
But what could you bring it out at?
Well, you know, with the
If they
history,
played in your backyard,
imagine
if
it's
they played in your
4.5.
backyard, what would you make Indianapolis favored in your backyard over Jacksonville?
The
four at least.
the fact that the number went over the 7, they came at 7 and they went ahead and I saw those 7.5s.
Yeah.
To go through that crucial number right away, that.
But that's sharp money, right? Because
That's the
most
way I
squares,
read it.
most squares aren't betting this game early.
So me reading that line and the way the line move went early, I like Indianapolis based off of what I'm seeing with the line. That's how I view it.
So you're saying it looks like they're inviting Jacksonville action.
Absolutely.
Interesting. Now, we talk about coaching transitions, and I, for one, believe that to be always huge. NFL, college, whatever. Some are bigger than others. How would you characterize, and I'll open this to either of you guys, how would you characterize the transition between Dungy and the new coach? Because clearly if there's a whole new staff and it's almost like a repudiation of the prior staff, that's one thing. That's a huge transition. This felt like more of almost like a president where there's the transition was more natural and handpicked. Do we consider it less because of that, the negativity of the transition?
To me, one example comes out right away. Now, when you have a coaching change and it's from a winning program and it's just the coaches deciding, you know, to retire or whatever, I think the team itself has more of an agenda to prove that it wasn't as much the system as it was the players. And all I could think back to, and we're going back to the great 49er teams, was Bill Walsh, the transition from Bill Walsh to George Seifert. They went on and went to the Super Bowl that year.
For those guys out there in their 20s, you might want to look this up on the internet.
They were a pretty good team, the Niners.
What about with George Hallis? Was there?
I wasn't that old. Thanks.
All right. So here's what all joking aside. Here's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing you say that the transition is smoother because of the closeness of the staffs, and now you've got the players really, frankly, wanting to prove that Tony Dungy wasn't the reason they succeeded.
Absolutely, and one that wasn't exactly the coaching handoff was the Pittsburgh Steelers just 3 years ago. You had a winning coach, a winning program, Bill Cowher, stepped away, and they hired Mike Tomlin, and he kept, and the winning continued. The Steelers, had a great year that first year with Tomlin.
Interesting. Okay, I was so upset as a Steeler fan about the way they played after they won the Super Bowl last time that I guess any change was going to be a good one after that. All right, VR, let me ask you a question. It strikes me Jacksonville was a team just 2 years ago that would be the next team to break through.
Sure.
And then lo and behold, last year there were major locker room issues. This year it seems like all of a sudden everyone thinks, oh, those issues are gone. Do we have any insight into did they clear out the problems? What's going to be different? Maybe the easy question is what's going to be different this year than last year with a Jacksonville team that underperformed?
The key is they're going to have to stay healthy. I think a lot of the issues came last year because of their health issues early on. The offensive line got hurt right away. That hurt their running game. That put a lot of pressure on Gerard. And I think from there the team just started crumbling. It just started going backwards. More and more injuries piled up for this team. I think this year the attitude is we're healthy. We could return back to that 07 status. That at least is what they're going into the season saying. They're saying all the right things from what I'm gathering from Jacksonville going to their website.
Okay, all right. So interesting conversation. This was segment 2. We're going to be back with another big game update, and we're going to be talking about Marco. Who are we talking about?
A game I think you might be a little bit interested in.
USC High State.
Yes, sir.
And we'll be and remember, you can get all the videos at pregame.tv, and we'll be right back.